Hello gamers, welcome back, or in case you are new here, I'm Encasiel. I love MMORPGs, and maybe like those of you intrigued by the title, I want an MMORPG that I can truly enjoy and sink countless hours into. While the title might be a slight exaggeration, I spoke with many others, and it seems that most of us that love the MMORPG genre want a new game that truly captivates us, that gives us the same feeling another MMO gave us years ago. For some of us might have been Ultima, for others WoW or Guild Wars 2. For me, my dearest MMO was Forsaken World. But regardless of what MMO captivated you years ago, you are here just like me, looking for that feeling in something new. So in this video, I want to talk about a few MMOs that are supposed to come out in the next year or so, and they might have a chance to fulfill that need for me, and maybe for some of you. I want to mention something before we begin. We had quite a few MMOs released in the past few years, and some other games that offered a very similar experience. And while I played most of them and even had quite a lot of fun playing them, these never seemed to last more than a few months in the best case. For example, I still log in to Throne and Liberty maybe once a week. At this point, it is only for the social element, but I had a decent amount of fun playing it and I still think it is a good game. Sadly, it fails to reach greatness, and I already explored everything it has to offer. I just don't see myself playing it for years to come. I ponder quite a bit why this is, and there are multiple reasons. At the end of the day, I'm simply not having as much fun as I used to. I'll probably make a video on this topic later. So taking this into consideration, I am only going to focus on future releases that have the potential to deliver at least the beginning of a long journey and fully capture our attention. The first MMO that I believe has potential, and I really mean it, is Chrono Odyssey. A lot about this MMO is shrouded in mystery. There was a focus group test back in February, and this had an NDA and only around 150 to 200 people were invited, so take anything unofficial you see online with a grain of salt. That being said, let's go over what is publicly known about the game and what you can expect from it. Chrono Odyssey will be a dark fantasy MMO. This means it is targeted at an adult audience. It will feature a seamless open world with various biomes, such as grasslands, snowlands, swamps, forests, and more. The endgame content will revolve around dungeons, raids, and grinding, but the game will also contain exploration content, world bosses, and even PvP. A big motive of this game is time and the ability to travel through time, and while we have to wait and see how this element is implemented from a story perspective, we know that it will also have an impact on combat. The player character will have an artifact called Chronotector, which will allow us to stop time in a small area for a couple of seconds, or even rewind a few seconds for our character, as a sort of ultimate ability. This just adds another layer to combat. Speaking of combat, the game will feature action combat, so attack chains, block and dodge. It will also have abilities. It appears that combat is somewhat similar to New World, but a lot better. Seriously, it's the combat in New World but improved. I've even seen people say that it's what New World should have been, and I fully agree with it, at least from a theoretical point of view. Realistically, even me saying that is too vague and too little information, and it doesn't really matter, because each of us has to test it for ourselves and then we can decide if we like it or not. As we have seen with Throne and Liberty, despite the vast majority of discourse online complaining about the combat, it was well received and it was most definitely not what is dragging the game down. That being said, here is what I know about combat. It seems there will be 6 classes at release: Swordman, Ranger, Sorcerer, Paladin, Berserker, and Assassin. Each of these classes will have multiple weapons available to them. From what we know, it appears that each class will have 3 weapon choices, and you will be able to choose 2 of them. You will also have the ability to swap weapons during combat. Each weapon will have 4 active abilities, and there will be 4 class abilities that are independent of weapons, and the Chronotector ability that I mentioned previously. All this customization seems okay. Another aspect of customization is the player character, and most people will be happy to know that this game is not gender locked and there are multiple body types and quite a bit of variety between the characters you can create. I truly hope they do the character creator justice, because personally, the very little customization and freedom available in the newer MMOs is getting to me. Everyone looks like a clone of each other, and it's pretty pathetic, especially when considering the vast amount of customization options that we used to have in early 2000s. One would assume that we would have more nowadays and not the absolute bare minimum. There is a bit more to the gameplay aspect. A lot of people enjoy life skilling, and while we know even less about this aspect than the rest, we know that the game will have fishing, harvesting, logging, mining, and skinning. There will also be the ability to craft equipment and consumables, as well as trade with other players. The last gameplay element that I should mention is that the game will have mounts, and I really hope that it's more than just horses, because whenever I see only horses in trailers, I get Black Desert PTSD. An exceptional MMORPG that refuses to add any other viable mounts other than horses. Nothing is really known about monetization, but the game comes from a Korean studio, Chrono Studio, formerly known as Npixel, and it is published by another Korean company, Kakao Games. Ideally, games should be self-published, but considering the other publishers available, like Amazon Games, that proven themselves to be exceptionally incompetent, this is not too bad. I try to be optimistic and think it can always be worse. That being said, it is safe to assume that the game will have some pay to win. If you are someone that sees pay to win ghosts everywhere, MMORPGs are simply not for you. There is no MMORPG in existence where you cannot pay to win, and that is a fact. What is more important is if the game has elements that make it inconvenient or unfun to play the game unless you pay. And we can only hope that those will not exist. Personally, I'm very excited to play this game, and I have high hopes for it. If you also would like to check out this MMO, I recommend heading to their Steam page and requesting access to their upcoming playtest. We do not have an exact date, but there will be a closed beta in June 2025, and the full release of the game is scheduled for the last quarter of 2025. The next MMO I'm looking forward to is Arche Age Chronicles, and this will be a very controversial title because it is the successor of Arche Age, which was an MMO with exceptional potential that instead of achieving even a little bit of that potential, ended up speedrunning failure in record time. I think no other MMO died as fast. There are some claims online that pay to win is what killed Arche Age. However, this can be immediately proven false by the fact that there are ways to pay to win in every single MMORPG, including those with millions of monthly players. The problem with the original Arche Age was that it gave players the agency to completely ruin other players' experience with little to no repercussions. Even worse, the game incentivizes this kind of behavior. At the end of the day, the player that got griefed over and over again simply stopped playing the game, as anyone capable of rational thinking will do. Games are supposed to be fun. If all a game provides you with is a miserable experience, it's simply not worth playing. An MMO will simply not be successful when the top 5% of players are having fun at the direct expense of 95% of the game's population, and make the in-game experience of those 95% completely unbearable. No matter what argument people bring to the table, this simple fact will never change. It is absolutely delusional to think that if they didn't sell labor pots in the cash shop, the game would have ended any other way. Anyway, I just wanted to clear the pay-to-win misinformation that is often parroted online about this title. With that out of the way, let's talk about what Arche Age Chronicles could potentially be. Adventure will take place on the continent of Auroria, which will resemble colonial America. Players will be pioneers in exploring a new continent. There will be two factions, the colonists and the previous empire, hence why I compare it to colonial America. They promise a fully fleshed out world with everything that we can expect in MMOs, dungeons, raids, both solo and group content, exploration, crafting, arenas and all that. However, unlike the original, Chronicles will be action combat, and in the words of the devs, they seek to provide a AAA single player level of gameplay in an MMO environment. Honestly, all this sounds very generic without further details, but the reason I'm excited for this title is those elements that were present in the original Arche Age and had so much potential. Hopefully those elements will be present and improved in Arche Age Chronicles. The original had multiple races, giant, elf, human, cat people, you get the point. This provided the ability to make a character that felt more personal than in many other titles. However, the real overwhelming amount of choice was present in the class selection system. In Arche Age, you created your class by selecting 3 skill sets from a total of 12 different skill sets, which means there were a total of 220 possible classes in game, which is absolutely amazing. Sadly, no other respectable MMO seems to have implemented anything similar, probably because of the complexity of such a system. New World and Throne and Liberty have a vaguely similar system to this, however it is so dumbed down that it doesn't really resemble it. Another cool feature that it had was the mount pet system. You raise your own pet, and once fully grown, it would end up being your combat pet that helped you out, and also it doubled as a mount. It was really cool. There's a lot of other features that the original had, like trade runs, housing, naval content, a crime system, and more. Almost all of these systems were fundamentally flawed in the original game, and we will have to wait and see if those flaws will be fixed in the sequel. The game had a lot of cool stuff, or stuff that could have been cool with a bit more work, but because it was such a massive failure, it was left with basically a skeleton crew, and none of its problems were actually fixed. I believe there is a high probability that history will repeat itself, and this title will be a failure, but there is that small chance this will end up being an absolutely amazing MMO, and because of that I look forward to it, and I think if you are in the market for a new MMO, you should at least keep an eye on further news about this title. As for the release date, it was initially scheduled for the end of 2025, but it has been recently pushed back to the beginning of 2026. Hopefully the wait will be worth it. These are the 2 titles that at this time I believe have the potential to deliver that dream MMO, even if the odds are extremely small, especially with Arche Age. Those odds exist, and I personally really hope they deliver an MMO that we can enjoy for years to come. There are more titles that I could talk about, like Bella Torres, but realistically, it will probably not get released during the next 12 months, so until we have more concrete information, there is no point in making the list longer than it needs to be. However, there are a few upcoming titles that I believe deserve honorable mentions. I include these next titles under honorable mentions because while I believe they will be fun, and I even recommend playing them, I am uncertain they will be able to capture my attention long term. Most likely they will just end up being fun for a few months. I hope I am wrong about them, but this is my initial impression. First honorable mention is Dune Awakening. This is a survival MMORPG. When I started playing it, I expected to play a survival game with a few MMO elements, but the game is actually an RPG with a few survival elements. And once you play it, you will understand what I mean by that. This game is set in the Dune universe, from the sci-fi book series, on the planet Arrakis, which is a desert planet, and the whole premise of the game is the fight over the control of a resource called spice. Since this is an honorable mention, I don't want to go into too much detail, but the game has a compelling story, great RPG elements, both melee and range shooter combat, and your character will have access to free abilities that you can freely mix and match from 5 different skill trees. Players can construct bases, build ground and air vehicles, and a lot more. My main complaint with this game is the fact that it only has 3 skill slots. It's just overly simplistic and lacks depth, which makes it easy to pick up and enjoy, but it might get quite boring after long periods of time. However, that is just my complaint. There are 2 very valid reasons why I put this game in honorable mentions. I believe the PvE content is lacking. To me, this means that the entire burden of the endgame gameplay loop will be on PvP, with the PvE just being a chore. I just don't believe that will be enough for long-term viability, at least not for me. In my time with the game, I have not reached endgame, so my opinion could be wrong. The second reason is that while the game is very well done and quite accurate to the universe of Dune, all the action happens on a desert planet, and seeing sands and rock all the time can and will get repetitive very fast. That being said, I do look forward to playing the game, and I expect to have at least 1 month of fun enjoying this game. I also have to say that the developers and the community team for this game is simply amazing. They are straightforward, they do not try to mislead people, and when they make videos they genuinely seem to be having fun, and honestly, it's quite refreshing. If you would be interested in this game, you will be able to play it very soon, on the 5th of June if you purchased Early Access, or on the 10th of June if you purchased the base game. The second honorable mention is SoulFrame. I personally think it's a really cool game, even now, but since it's in alpha, a lot of it is subject to change. It features action combat and magic abilities, but there is no point in going into a lot of detail here since they have reworked the combat multiple times now, and they might continue to do so. The story is about you and your allies fighting against an empire that seeks to strip the world of its resources. One of the extremely cool aspects of SoulFrame is the way the game is centered around exploration and paying attention to your environment rather than rushing through content. It fundamentally changes the experience, and I personally really enjoyed this. However, there are 2 reasons why it's in the honorable mentions only. The first one is that while you can play the game right now, if you have access, the game is far from complete. I am unable to say when it will be in a ready state for the general public. It all will depend on how quickly they add systems and content. And the second reason is that the game is more focused on horizontal progression than vertical. It's from the same studio that made Warframe, and there are some similarities there. Until they add some long-term goals that will keep us engaged for thousands of hours, I remain reserved in the ability to capture my attention for more than a few months at a time. If you are interested in trying out SoulFrame, you can head over to their official website and sign up, and you will receive an invite whenever they send out an invite wave. I talked about a couple of honorable mentions, and I also have a dishonorable one. A game that I advise staying away from for at least the perceivable future. Ashes of Creation is a crowdfunded MMO that keeps making the rounds in the MMO Online discourse every few months, with a lot of content creators pushing the narrative that this game is great. Probably because of the referral program that promises cash rewards after the game launches, this game sounds like it could belong on this list, but it very much does not. The person behind the game is Steven, who is an exceptional salesman. If he and the Ashes of Creation community were stuck in the desert, he would successfully convince them to trade their water for sand, and even make them gather it themselves. However, what he cannot do is deliver on what he promised when he promised to deliver it. I never expect anyone to agree with me by default. Do your own research. If you have just a couple of hours, learn the very basics of game development, and you will realize that the game is in a terrible state after 9 years of so-called development, almost like all their efforts were put into making videos. And that is just from a technical standpoint. The way this so-called studio does things makes companies like Ubisoft, EA, Activision, and other predatory developers look like honest and upstanding developers. So my personal advice is to anyone that does not have a fetish about getting scammed to avoid this project. I actually advise staying away from the vast majority of crowdfunded MMOs, because if investors that throw money at slop like Concord and Assassin's Creed Shadows cannot be convinced to spend money on a game, then that game is not worth making. There are a few exceptions that exist, but they are as rare as a unicorn. To wrap this video up, this is my list of upcoming MMOs that I believe have a chance, however small, to deliver that experience which some of us are craving from a new MMO. I wish there were more, and maybe there are some projects where developers are keeping quiet for now. Honestly, even if these few titles don't manage to scratch that MMO itch, we live in the best time for gaming. We might not have the most amazing MMO to play, but there are so many amazing games getting released all the time. But I still hope that one day I will have an MMO that makes me forget and lose interest in any and all other games. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe, comment, like and all that, or don't. See you in the next one, gamers.